Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today on this great discussion which will unfold. This is our first discussion on the ETF side, and we are very happy to bring it to you. See, just to give you a perspective, what we would like to bring to you is that, when we are at a juncture or a very interesting juncture in India on the future of investing, I personally believe that the way we used to invest before the COVID-19 lockdown and the way we will invest after COVID-19 will be very different. I'm sure my co-panelists will bring that out in the discussion to come, because finally we are seeing the advent of holistic financial planning, and what matters to you more is your underlying product, which will take you to the goal rather than the product in itself. In that perspective, today's discussion on ETF is very important, because globally the size of the passive industry is as big as the active industry. The global ETF assets today are at around 6.6 trillion, which is twice the size of the Indian economy. We at Mirae Asset, we ventured into the ETF business in 2006, and in the last 15 years, we have grown significantly, both organically and inorganically in the global markets. Right now, we are present in 9 countries and manage around 370 ETFs with an aggregate AUM of around 38 billion. Globally, we are the 18th ETF player and pride ourselves as being a niche ETF player doing innovative strategies across segments. In India too, we've seen the tide turning. The focus on market returns is increasing, and especially with fresh investors, passive products provide the opportunity to get an initial flavor on equity markets. Investors can start their investment journey towards wealth creation in equity markets with passive products, and then graduate from there to active as they bring on the debate of whether one should beat the benchmark or underperform the benchmark. Passive products can be used to fill gaps in the portfolio, and it would be wise to take advantage of what we propose, a good active plus passive strategy going forward. You cannot forget the added feature of the product, like the low cost which it brings, that is inherent to the product. The real-time NAV and the tradability of ETFs are a compelling investment product for times to come. The rise of innovation in broking and fintech companies has made ETFs more convenient, and that's something which will be discussed today, and inexpensive as well. It has also helped to create the ecosystem for the product, which we have seen, especially in the lockdown period, the dramatic increase in the demat accounts. We decided to venture into ETFs from the existing in India in 2018. In the last 2 years, we've been able to focus or set the foundation of the business right. It is a different business in itself, and we believe we have a long way to go in that. And then by learning from the existing challenges, our focus has been to provide ETFs to our investors at the right price and to ensure ample liquidity. We aim to ensure our ETFs are able to track real-time intraday movements of the index on exchange and replicate the index performance, which is the mandate of passive funds with minimal added cost. I hope we have an engaging session today with our guest speakers throwing more light on different aspects of passive products, and I hope more clients will start embracing and taking advantage of passive products in their overall portfolio strategies. Thank you, and let's start the discussion as we speak.
Thank you, sir, for your views. That was very enlightening. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what is going to be a very interesting discussion on how you can aim to build a resilient portfolio with passive products. For this session, we have 2 esteemed figures from investment industry, Mr. Anish Teli and Mr. Vishal Dhawan. A quick introduction. Mr. Anish Teli is the managing partner and fund manager at QED Capital. He set up QED Capital in 2015 to manage third-party funds. Previously, he has worked in senior positions with private equity funds managed by ICICI Venture and Morgan Stanley Private Equity Asia for over 10 years. In 2011, he became an independent investor. Anish is a rank-holding chartered accountant and an MBA from Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. Our second panelist, Mr. Vishal Dhawan, is a certified financial planner and founder of Plan Ahead Wealth Advisors, a SEBI registered investment advisory firm. Plan Ahead has won the Best Investment Advisor for 4 years running in the Outlook Money Award and was second runner-up in the Plan Plus Global Awards Asia region for 2017 and 18. Vishal's 20 plus years of experience results in him frequently writing columns and appearing on television. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today for this webinar. So
Thanks for having me.
I'll be moderating this session and throwing some questions to the panelists. And I'll start my discussion by asking Anish first. Anish, so as per you, what has been the trigger in the Indian market that has changed the way investor looks at passive funds?
Hi, Siddharth. Hi, Vishal. So, I think the immediate trigger, if you look at, has been, I would say, threefold. The biggest one is that there was a change in SEBI regulation that came about 3-4 years ago, where SEBI mandated that you can only have one fund in every category. Secondly, they made the classification of large cap, small cap, mid cap very clear, and said that if you are a large cap, you cannot invest more than X percentage in a mid cap or a small cap. So, that was there. And the third change they made was benchmarking to total returns index and not the price index. So all these three things, what sharply showed the gap that was there between active and passive returns. And when you look at the SPIVA reports, when you look at the other reports that come out, it was fairly clear that our large cap category was finding it very hard to outperform the benchmark. And added to that fact is that the market has become informationally very efficient in the last 10 to 15 years. And you can see that fact by, if you take the standard deviation of returns of large cap funds especially, you will see that it has fallen quite a bit. So which means in simple terms that the gap between the best performing large cap fund and the lower performing large cap fund is very little right now. So which means that, it's basically you're having a lot of the fund managers competing among themselves. You don't have a lot of other investors in the market. So when the market becomes full of very skilled players, it becomes efficient, and that's what I think has really happened in especially the large cap space. I think the jury is still out on the mid and small cap, but I think in the large cap space, it's fairly evident that there is very little alpha to capture.
So do you believe this is a short-term phenomena which we are seeing, especially in the large cap category, or do you think this is a more long-term change which is happening right now?
No, I think it's a phenomenon that started 20 years ago, and it's a phenomenon that's been prevalent in the US since 1976 and has only been growing and has grown exponentially post 2008. When I think all of us have seen that big graph of Credit Suisse where they show the outflow from from active and inflows into passive. So I think in India we're just getting started. We are 20 years from the launch of the first passive product, and I don't think this is a short-term phenomenon.
Vishal, how has been your journey in adapting and including passive products in your overall product offering?
So I think there are three variables that tend to be very important while making product choices. One is your, and it's probably the most important thing, is your probability of success or failure when you make a certain decision. I think what a lot of investors and advisors do end up doing very often is believe that they know what is going to be the outcome at a certain point in time in the future, and therefore make their decisions based on that particular outcome. Actually, what we've seen is that there is a range of possible outcomes that are possible. And what everyone needs to be able to do is assign a probability to what those ranges of outcomes are likely to be, and therefore which one is more likely to happen than something else. Of course, at the end of that journey, you will know which was the most efficient outcome. But while you're making this decision, you have to make it forward, not backward. And what we found is that when you start to, make your decisions in this particular manner, you will start to find that passive products increase your probability of success because they do end up mirroring market returns very, very closely. And most people tend to be okay as long as they get the market return, because historically what Indian equity markets have shown, like in most other parts of the world, is that equity markets tend to trend upwards over a period of time, even though there may be periods where they, kind of go down along the way as well. So clearly that's been one driver. The second is we believe that the world has been moving to a lower return world for the last many years. And I think there is a certain disbelief that exists because we don't want to hear that. We still want to believe that you can get 15, 20% returns very easily. And a lot of us are constantly hearing that kind of conversation happening. But if you go back and look at how trends have worked, you would typically find that Indian returns have started to fall just like international returns have been falling over a period of time. And this is quite normal because once inflation starts to come down in the economy, you start to see interest rates come down, you start to see bank deposits trend downwards, and equity as an asset class, which tends to be most popular amongst the ETF providers at this point, also is seeing a return which is higher than what those instruments are. But obviously those instruments itself are now lower, and therefore the higher return is actually a lower return. So that lower return means that you need to find more efficiency in the products that you use. And passive products have tended to be very efficient from a cost perspective. The third thing, which I think is also very, very critical, is that as more and more people have tasted investing and put their own money in there, they've realized that it's very hard to actually pick the winner. And these winners are constantly rotating. So what they do require is a basket or a set of products that can combine well together to be able to give a outcome which is probably efficient in terms of returns and also manage the risk along the way in a comfortable manner so that they don't lose patience along the way and they don't end up in a situation where they panic during periods when things are not going in the way that they wanted. So I think all of these three things have been very, very crucial in driving advisors like us to look at passive as a very important part of investor portfolios.
Very fair points, Vishal. So, I'm like people now, if we did talk about passive products, they only talk about market returns and low cost. And you also talked about that we can use this to do asset allocation and reduce and manage the risk of the overall portfolio. Anish, as per you, apart from the low cost and the market returns, what can be the other uses of these passive products?
So, I think today we are looking at most investors are now have thanks to the job that people like Vishal and other financial planners are doing. People have become more discerning in their financial planning. They are looking at goals. They are looking to fulfill that. Okay, and some of the typical goals are building a corpus for retirement or child education or child marriage or just a wealth building corpus, and they want to do it with a certain amount of certainty that that I will reach my goal. And financial planners are also realizing that we need to that, like Vishal rightly mentioned, that the certainty that you will get the market return with a passive product is very, very important when you're planning a goal which is out there in the future. And like he said that we've seen in studies now in India also that a top performing fund usually reverts back to the mean, and then again after 3-4 years it falls to the second or the third quartile, and then again the third, fourth quartile fund starts moving up. So it's very hard to stop investors from looking into the rear view mirror and making decisions. So when you use a passive product, you can actually tell them that, look, we are going to get this X amount of return, which is, let's say, let me take an example of the most basic passive product, which is an index fund, let's say a Nifty 50 or a Nifty 100 fund. So you can broadly say that the return of the Nifty is going to be in line with the growth of the underlying earnings of the companies that it represents. And that is if it's a broad representation of the economy, it's going to be in line with GDP plus a certain amount. So you can plan better with that kind of product. So I would say that that's where it helps a lot.
Vishal, coming back to you, you talked about building portfolios using passive products to manage the risk return profile of an investor. So, what kind of portfolio strategies can be used with passive products to take maximum advantage of different scenarios?
So the first thing that we tend to want to explain to investors very often is that there is somehow a belief that mutual funds and ETFs are all about equity. And that's pretty different from what the reality has been. In fact, even if you look at India, you'll find that ETFs really gained popularity when they started off with gold as an asset class. And they went through a full cycle where gold did very well, then went through a very, very poor patch for a long period of time, and then has kind of come back very strongly over the last year or so. So I think the first important principle to keep in mind is that the underlying asset class on an ETF can be equity, it can be gold, it can be fixed income as well. And I think as time passes, you will start to see more and more ETF variations start to be available in India as well. Though some of those are still very restricted here. So already in India, you have something that allows you to buy US indices, you have something that allows you to buy indices in Hong Kong, you have something that allows you to buy liquid funds in India. So there is a wide range that's available, and it's now started moving to sectors as well. I think therefore it's important to understand that really you can complete a full portfolio by using ETFs and index products, rather than just believing that these are going to be kind of on the side products and you can just add them in like a sprinkling or a flavor that you put on something that you eat. The second thing that we need to keep in mind is that there is a lot of scientific data that is now available, because Indian financial markets have been there for a fairly substantial period of time. And what therefore it allows you to do is look at data across multiple timeframes, which wasn't the case when, let's say, you looked at the same data 20 years ago. So what happened is that 20 years back, you had history which was limited. For most people who would be aware, even the Sensex data that got created in 1986 actually kind of went back to 79 and rebased to 100. So effectively, if you went back 20 years ago, you had limited pools of data to be able to make decisions. Today, when you look at the same pieces of data, you find that you've had periods where markets have done extremely well. You've had periods where markets have done extremely poorly. You can mix and match. You can see in what kind of periods, what has worked, what kind of volatility has got demonstrated, what kind of ratios, from a risk perspective versus returns throw up. So I think the more you have data, the more you're able to slice and dice information and be able to make hopefully what will turn out to be better decisions in the future. So I think both of these have been very, very important pieces of making those choices, of being able to put together solutions using ETFs. And last but not the least, the investor mindset that Anish also spoke about. So investors have changed their own mindset of saying that we want to solve for either a particular goal or a set of goals that we need to achieve. And very often we want to be able to do that in a manner where we want to continue to focus on being and doing what we are best at, which is our own professional commitments. So, we can make much more money in whatever we do if as a medical professional, we are focused on being a doctor, or as a, engineer on, working in my role in a company, or running my own business as an entrepreneur. And I think that change in mindset, saying I need a solution which allows me to have a certain probability of success, has also helped this entire, solution gain so much more traction over the last few years.
Absolutely. And I think what you've said right now makes much sense, that it is the goal which a particular investor should be focused on, rather than the way to achieve that goal, whether it is through active or passive, or merging both active and passive? So my next question is now there has been a lot of talk that large cap mutual funds are not outperforming the benchmark. If we look at recent July ending data, almost 92% of the large cap funds have underperformed Nifty 50 in 3 years by a margin of 2.5%. So now, how should investor approach if I let's say only equity segment? Should he use Nifty 50 and Sensex as his core holdings and build satellite portfolio using the active mutual funds, or should it be other way around, or should it actually depend on the risk profile of an investor?
So would you like me to take that?
Vishal, please.
Okay. Siddharth, so I think the starting point for all investment decisions have to come from two places besides goals. One is what kind of risk tolerance an investor has, and really risk tolerance gets tested when downsides happen. I think upside risk tolerance is normally not a good indicator. And second is what's the kind of investment time horizon that comes with that particular objective. So you could have the same goal, let's say an education goal for graduation, looking very different from a construct perspective for someone whose child is going to go to college next year versus someone whose child is going to go to college 15 years out, because the child today is only say 3 years old. So clearly time horizon and risk tolerance are both very, very important parameters while making these choices. And essentially the asset class choices will come from both of these places, which is, should I construct a purely equity only solution, or should I look at a solution that is multi-asset class and therefore build it out? In addition to this, I think it's also important for investors to keep in mind that they need to look at within their asset allocation choices, also the geography choices that they make. Somewhere, we've always over the last many years built solutions that are very domestic in nature, assuming that all the returns in the world are going to come from products that are available in India only. And what data has clearly shown us is that globally diversified portfolios tend to be much more robust in terms of both risk and return parameters. And therefore the choice of asset class needs to get finely tuned with the choice of geographies as well. So assuming that we've got geography in place, we've got asset class in place, because we've got the time horizon and the risk profile all together, I think the question really is that what is the building blocks of your portfolio going to be like? And our view therefore is that a broad-based index tends to be a very, very good starting point for any strategy to get built out as the core of a particular strategy. So what I mean by broad-based index is that if we were trying to build this in the US, something like an S&P 500 is very broad-based. It gives you access to very, very diversified portfolio. In India, what you find is that the top 50 stocks tend to have a large overriding impact in terms of what they deliver as far as market returns are concerned. And therefore, our belief is that Sensex and Nifty, in whatever proportion investors find efficient, do tend to be good starting points for them to build their core portfolio. I think time will show us whether maybe a Nifty 100 might be an even better place than a Nifty 50. But I do think that the starting point is going to end up being the Sensex or the Nifty 50. And I think as investors get more used to and more refined with their passive strategies, you will start to get other things coming in there as well. And clearly, as the SPIVA reports have shown, and it's very interesting when you look at SPIVA reports, that this outperformance of passive funds that now gets talked about is actually evident for many years now, even in India. So it doesn't seem like it's a short-term trend that's going to play out. I think it's just about investor mindset changing to say that being average and getting market returns is actually good enough, and I don't have to find the best performing fund or the best performing investment so that I can talk about it to my friends and tell them that I did so well because I picked a certain thing overall.
Anish, do you want to add anything on that? How
Yeah.
should he approach building his portfolio using passive and active or either?
Yeah. So I'll just add to what Vishal said by giving a couple of examples, live examples of some clients for whom we are doing this. So we have a product called Index Alpha, and then we do some amount of goal building for a client. And so now one example is of a client who's 55 years old and he's pretty close to retirement. He's about 10 years away from retirement. So for him, we would build a portfolio of equity along with a large dose of debt and some amount of gold, because that investor is of that mindset that he wants a little bit of gold in his portfolio. Now versus a person who's come to us who's 35 and he says, look, I have this amount of money. I just want you to put it away in a compounding way. And I don't want to touch it for the next 20 years. I'm very confident of that. So like he said, you have to be take into account the investor's risk ability as well as the tolerance. Now, people think that they can tolerate a 10-20% drawdown, but the moment you see a 10-15% fall, people come calling saying, oh, my fund has fallen 15%, 20%. Now what should I do? So taking into account the risk ability and risk tolerance of a client is very, very important. And then, using that as a starting point, and then seeing what their goals are. For example, do they want to sort of build it for retirement, and then are they going to sort of be withdrawing from that to pay their monthly expenses post retirement? So then how do the weightages change over the years? So one simple example of that is what you get in the US is a target date fund. These are very simple products that you get. So it's like a balanced fund, but from the very beginning that every 5 years the weight between the equity part and the debt part is going to change by 5% every year. So we've designed something like that if you're going to retire in 2050, we're going to start with your core holding in a passive product at around 70%. We'll have a passive active overlay of around 10%, and we'll have 20 years debt, and then we keep balancing that every 5 years as we go along. One more behavioral aspect of why you should combine both is that as humans, like Vishal also mentioned, that well, people don't want average returns. They also want something. They want a chance of outperformance, even though they know that that chance is very, very less. They still want that. They want that optionality there to be there. So if you give somebody, if you say that even though you may think that, okay, 100% passive product is what this person needs, ideally you give him, something like 85 and 15, because that 15 will help him to stick to the 85, because he'll think, okay, I have that 15, that's giving me the chance to outperform, so I'm not going to mess with the 85. Versus if you give him the entire 100 up front, he's going to feel that he's missing out he'll get FOMO. He'll say, okay, I'm missing out. Oh, the market has recovered in 3-4 months. So you need to take into account the behavioral, the way the investor is also going to behave along the journey with you. So we take that all that into account while building a portfolio like that. So we use the core satellite approach to do that, or we use the balanced fund approach to do that, and or a tactical asset allocation approach. So we use all these 3-4 methods of portfolio constructions to use both passive and active. But passive does play a bigger role in that.
Very fair points, Anish. So coming back to you, which segment of clients do you recommend the passive products to?
So I would say, that passive products are like I said, again, it's not about a segment of clients, it's about the goal. So, there's this endowment fund in the US called the University of Nevada, and they have almost 80 to 90% of a $35 billion endowment fund is allocated to passive products. Now, and you can, it's suitable for them, whereas it's also suitable for somebody, who's just starting out on his journey as an investor, because it's the simplest product out there. It's a good product for them to experience the market, to experience a cycle in the market. You can put a small amount, 5,000, 10,000 rupees, and see, how market cycles, perform, how you are reacting in those market cycles. So it really depends. It can be used for anybody. It's not really dependent on a client. It's really more dependent on the goal that the client has and how you can use those as building blocks for that client, and how it fits into his journey over the years.
So, Vishal, what are the some of the challenges you face while pitching passive products to your client, and how do you overcome them? Because I think initially there will be some resistance in taking up passive products. So, how do you address those?
So I think the desire to outperform markets has always tended to be a core need when making an investment choice. It's really about how much is enough for an investor, and very often the way you start off with is you start off with a certain best outcome versus an average outcome versus a poor outcome. And what we found is that if you only speak about outcomes, the probability has always been that investors will veer towards the best outcome decision. And that best outcome, is going to be some fund, which is an active fund, which has outperformed over certain periods, but which, if you go by history, you will find that, when winners rotate, this fund will actually move off the radar. Now, the moment you start adding probability of success into that same equation, saying that, yes, we might have a chance of getting there, but our probability of success is, say, X. While if we are using a average market return product, where our probability of success is, say, 4X, I think people are then able to weigh these two numbers together and make some of those choices. So one of the big, help has come from the fact that the moment you've been able to show data rather than using gut feel and saying, talking about international trends, it's about having data to support an argument saying that this is not an international phenomena, because a lot of what has worked internationally has not worked in India in multiple other places. We know so many consumer companies talk about why India is a different market. And, with investments, the data is very, very similar to what has been seen internationally, that as time passes, it becomes harder and harder for active players to outperform an index. And I think as people have seen more and more of that data, especially from independent advisors, I think there's been more confidence. The second piece of resistance has always been about the fact that, costs have been a little less transparent in our industry in the past. And what has been very helpful is to bring costs right up front on the table for investors to understand. So very often they've been buying products where costs have been embedded, whether it's been, mutual fund products or insurance products or anything else. Most people have been used to paying costs in an embedded structure where the product fee itself compensates the advisor. And with the change in regulations that came in a few years ago, we've started to see more and more abilities for the cost to actually get broken up into different elements, from the product cost to the intermediation or advisory cost. And therefore investors are able to see all of this. And I think as a price sensitive, market that we are, I think the more that you've been able to explain how costs on ETFs and index products are very efficient as compared to active products, the better it's been for investors to be able to see that. The third piece of resistance, of course, has come from the fact that a lot of the products don't have enough track records. And I think investors have become very savvy in understanding that they should always be buying products that come with a track record. And it's been a bit of a challenge to explain that the track record of an ETF or an index fund doesn't actually come from, who's managing the fund, how long the person's been managing it, but comes from different areas like tracking errors and liquidity on the underlying ETF. So I think that education and conversation is where we found that there tends to be resistance. And we think that that's a normal journey as investors get more used to this, as there are more ETF products. I think a lot of individuals are still unaware that the PF that they contribute to as a part of their companies, a large portion of that money on the equity side goes towards ETFs. And therefore, even things that they are doing without realizing are going towards index ETF kind of solutions. And therefore, I think it's only natural that as time passes, more and more people will accept this to become mainstream for them.
Absolutely. My next question, Anish, is basically it's split into two. That what do you feel is the future of passive industry, both on the product side and on the usage side? Because if we look at India right now, it's behind US, right, around a decade or so. So in terms of products, if we are talking about, it's mostly dominated by Nifty 50 and Sensex ETFs. Though the industry is 2.1 lakh crores, the predominant money is into these two indices. And on the usage side, as we discussed earlier, it's predominantly still all about market returns and low cost. So how do you see these two aspects of passive industry evolving going forward?
Yeah, so I think the future of so let's just first go back and look at the word passive. It's easier to explain passive and active, but as you know that rightly so, and that passive is not a passive product is not actually passive. There is an underlying methodology in the index which keeps on which keeps on keeping the winners and keeping the outperformers, throwing them out. There is a process at play, right? So it's not really on a relative basis. It is less active than the active funds out there, but it's not really a passive product. The way in India, a cricket analogy always works. So the way I explain to many people is that the index is like your Indian cricket team. Performers continue to, your best 11 are picked, so the best 50 are picked on certain criteria which is laid out up front. The process is transparent. If you keep performing, you remain in the index. If you stop performing, every 6 months there's a review and you get dropped if you are not performing. So at any point in time, the best 11 are representing the country. The best performing companies in a certain sense by the metric being market cap are present in the index. So so that's one aspect that is sometimes gets missed out, because people think passive means that it's just passive is not the same thing as static. It's not a static underlying strategy. There is some method there by which it is growing over the years. Now, having said that, there are a lot of other products that could also come in, which are based on factors, and we are seeing the early days of that, like factor. So market is the simplest factor out there. What are you getting when you buy an index? You're getting the equity risk premium. You're getting premium for taking equity risk versus a debt risk. So you're taking the market factor there. Like that, there are 5 or 6 other factors like value, momentum, low volatility, quality, which is a big factor in India, which is also what a lot of active fund managers use in picking their stocks. But now these can be sort of, be made available to investors in a passive wrapper, so to speak, that you can have a rules-based strategy which will deliver to you quality if you so desire, which will deliver to you momentum if you so desire, which will deliver value to you if you so desire. So all these things will I think will have already started and will only continue to grow. But yes, if we get the four broad asset classes that we have. So we have equity, which is well covered. There is a lot of scope in fixed income. I would say that we only have a liquid fund product here, but we don't have a long-term fixed income product like a 10-year treasury yield product, or a 30-year gilt fund, or a 10-year gilt fund. So if that could if that side of the market has a lot of scope for innovation, I would say. In terms of commodities, we have gold, but we don't have silver. For some reason, silver ETFs are not getting the permission from SEBI, for launching. In commodities, you could also have crude, you could also have agri commodities, you could have a lot of those kind of commodities. In the US, you have such niche industries such as pork and orange juice and stuff like that. So you have it's as deep as that. And then the fourth one is real estate. So we have REITs now, uh, which are again coming. So you could have a passive product which consists of REITs, which would give you exposure to real estate. So I think if one looks beyond just equity, I think equity is there to stay and grow. And like Vishal mentioned, the EPF, the EPFO sort of investing in an index fund is a big move. So you are getting indirect exposure to the index fund if you are contributing to your PF. And the index ETF today, or the index fund, is the single largest fund in the industry out there today, where the EPFO has to invest by mandate. So so the equity size of the industry, I think, is growing, but and has all the products that are out there. But one area where they could grow into are these factor-based funds, which are sort of semi-passive, I would say. And there is a lot of scope to grow on the fixed income or the debt side. There is a lot of scope on the commodities side. There is a lot of scope on the real estate side. So I think those areas are where the passive industry in India could make a lot of progress over the next few years.
Sure. My last question to both of you is how suitable is fund of fund structure in passive investment, and what can be some of the advantages? Vishal, can you take this one up first?
Sure. So I think the biggest challenge for a lot of investors, which we've seen actually, which maybe looks a little different in the last 3 months because of the number of demat accounts that have opened up, has been actually access to a demat account and access to a exchange infrastructure where you can actually go out and buy an ETF product. And what has happened in there is that clearly an FOF has come in and allowed people to actually get access to ETFs a lot more easily as compared to what may have existed earlier, because you don't actually need a demat account or a broking account to actually buy and hold that asset at all. The second advantage of an FOF has come from the fact that the FOF could be acting as a manager based on a certain set of rules that could be preset, so that the mix of the underlying ETFs can change automatically basis a certain set of parameters. I think one of the challenges that most investors face, especially if they don't work with an advisor, is that they're not sure about when they should be exiting which ETF and what they should be buying, and how much of what they are holding should be exited and how much of something new should be brought in there. So what an FOF does is, if it works on well-defined rules that are tested by past data, it allows this rebalancing to happen for the investor by himself or herself at a small cost. And the third is that the FOF also becomes very efficient because of the transaction and tax costs that might end up getting incurred by clients or investors by themselves if they have to rebalance. Because whatever changes happen within an FOF, those are not going to get individually taxed at an investor level, but happen within the fund structure. So I think there are big advantages of an FOF structure. And therefore, even if investors do have access to a demat account more easily or to trading infrastructure more easily today, they might still want to look at FOFs for the other two benefits that I spoke about.
Anish, your views on this?
Yeah, I think I would broadly agree with what Vishal said. I think access to a demat account, I think people find it easier to buy a mutual fund than to open a demat account. So I think access becomes much easier if you have it in a FOF wrapper. The tax advantage is also huge, that that if you are able to combine different ETFs or different passive products into one wrapper, then on the tax that you might have to pay on rebalancing, that sort of gets taken care of, and that goes a long way when you're looking at long-term compounding returns. The third one I would say is that it enables the AMC or the fund manager to actually provide a solution out there in one package. So, for example, the target date retirement fund that I spoke of. So, if you were to sort of build something like that into a fund of fund structure, saying that okay, I'm going to retire in 2050. I'm made enough, and you buy this fund of fund, and that fund of fund is investing in the underlying index ETF. It's investing in an underlying fixed ETF, fixed income ETF, and it's investing in underlying commodities or real estate or whatever, however you've done. And the rules for rebalancing are laid out upfront. So you are actually able to provide, if somebody was like, who's not very hands-on, or somebody like, we mentioned earlier in the conversation, he says that, okay, just give me a solution and I want to go on with my life as usual. I want to focus on my job. I don't want to keep monitoring, statements every month or every week or every quarter. Give me a solution which has a high probability of helping me reach my goal. So I think a fund of fund structure actually allows people, AMCs to sort of give investors those solution-based products, which I think are very helpful to financial planners to explain it, and design financial plans for their clients.
Rightly said. I think fund of fund structure now provides a very good solution to invest in the passive side, and especially considering that ETF itself has a very low cost, so the fund of fund will also have a low cost. And
Yes.
based on new guidelines, equity ETF based fund of fund will have equity taxation. So all this also adds to the appeal of the fund of fund, which is investing in ETF. It makes the entire process of investing very convenient for the end investor. So thank you for answering all those questions, and now we'll be moving to the Q&A segment where we'll be taking questions from the audience. Request the audience to please post your questions in the chat box. Initially, I'll be taking the questions we have received on mail, and then I'll move to address the questions which have been posted here in the chat box. So the first question is from Chirayu Gupta. He wants to know which portfolio is the best: only active fund, only passive funds, or blend of both. Anish, I think you've already answered it, so
Yeah.
Can you take this one up again?
Yeah, so I think again, Chirag, right? So
Yeah.
Chirayu. Chirayu, again, I would say that you flip the question around. What is your goal? You are, what is it that what is your time horizon? What is your risk ability? I think if you answer those questions, you will get the solution yourself. You will you will know what product fit the product into your goals rather than trying to fit the, the goal into your product. So I would say that, but if you want an answer, I would say go for a mix of both. The weightage that that you would give to either one of them depends a lot on your risk ability, your risk tolerance, and the time horizon for your goal.
Okay, the second question is from Jay Singh. He asked, sorry, can you advise asset allocation for a moderate to aggressive investor for a time horizon of 5 years? Vishal, can you take this one up?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning earlier, I think the important part on this is to, be able to fully understand that, any sort of asset allocation will always have to come with rebalancing coming with it. And what tends to happen very often is for most investors who try to create their own asset allocation, we find that the asset allocation at the start is fine, but what is missing is the rebalancing on a periodic basis. So let me give an example. Let's say if we look at a portfolio that started off 3 months ago, let's assume that a moderate portfolio had about 50% in equity and 50% in debt assets at its most simple level. Equity markets in the last 3 months have moved up by somewhere in the region of about 40%, which means that the 50 would have gone to 70, while the debt, it's also moved up because interest rates have gone down, but would probably, be about 30 to 35. So effectively that same mix of 50-50 just 3 months ago has now become approximately 65-35. And therefore what the investor needs to do is take out 15 from equity and move that to debt so that the whole mix remains constant. Rather than trying to worry very often about whether that 70 or 65 in equity is going to become 80 or it's going to become 50 by itself. I think the question that comes to us very often is, are markets going to fall? Are markets overvalued? Are P's too high? I think those are very difficult questions to answer, because what ends up happening is that liquidity can take everything up much more than what it is valued at. Similarly, fear can take everything down to much lower than what it should be valued at. It's very rare that markets are in a zone where they're truly valued and fairly valued. So our view is that as long as you're following rebalancing, for moderate investors, our view is that 50% in debt, about 30% in India equity to start off with, 10% in international equity, and 10% in gold is a good asset allocation with rebalancing. For an investor who wants to be more aggressive, we could actually move the debt component down from being about 50 to being about 20 to 30 instead, and actually replace that with a combination of international and domestic equity equally. But I do think it's very, very important that aggressive gets separated from very aggressive. I think somehow in our mind we always have that aggressive means all my money has to go into one asset class, and that one asset class is domestic equity. I think that's the mindset that we need to change.
So so the next question we have is actually it's good to get a question on ETF from someone who's starting afresh starting for the first time in investment, and he's asking, as a new starter in passive products, what is a good place to start, India or abroad? So Anisha, can you take this one up?
I think as humans, I think we are more comfortable with what we know. And since you are a first-time investor, I would suggest that you go with a domestic allocation first, and then use international as a diversifier. As you get to experience equity markets, you get to understand cycles, you get to understand what you also understand is your own self when you invest in equity, because it's not about the market or it's not about the fund manager. It's about how you react and how you behave. Like when you had a COVID fall in March, or before that when Trump was elected, or we had Brexit, or we had demonetization. How do you respond to those events is very important as a beginner investor. So I would say go, and studies have shown there is a huge amount of home country bias when it comes to investing. That investors tend to be more comfortable with their own country. So I would say if you're a beginning investor, go with a domestic equity or a passive fund, and then maybe you can look at maybe a 5-10% allocation to an international fund.
So Anish, she's additionally asking, and I think that is a very interesting question and apt question for the first time investor, that for him, what should be the initial allocation he should ideally make towards passive investments?
So again, it depends on what his goal is. It depends if he's looking to just understand himself and say that, okay, I'm going to save this money for the next 5 years because I'm going to get married or something of that sort. Then his allocation, and even in passive, you have we're looking at equity and we're looking at debt, because you can have a liquid fund in passive as well as you can have a passive equity fund. So even within passive, I think first he needs to answer what his time horizon is. he needs to look at what his risk tolerance is. And 5 years, I would say, is usually not a very, very long-term horizon. So you can't afford to be very aggressive. I would typically not go over, 40 to 50% if you're looking at a 5-year horizon.
Thank you for that, Anish. The next question for you, Vishal, is for how long should I stay invested in a passive product? Is there a particular time limit? Should I be and I'm just adding on to that question. I think what that person is asking, is it a more of a tactical allocation or a short-term allocation or a long-term strategic allocation, which I should look at while investing in ETFs?
So that's a very good question because it does come to us very often in the real world as well. So I think I'd like to start off with first defining what is a right investment horizon for equity as an asset class itself, before making the distinction between what it should be for an passive strategy or an active strategy. I think it's fairly clear that 3 to 5 years that a lot of people talk about as being an appropriate investment horizon is, in our experience, not an appropriate investment horizon for equities. It's too short because equity cycles can last both on the upside and downside much longer than 3 to 5 years. And therefore, if you want to increase your probability of success while investing in equities, your normal investment horizon should be anywhere between 7 years to 15 years to be able to deal with the investment horizon that is ideal for equities. Now, the moment you have changed your investment horizon away from 3 to 5 years to 7 to 15 years, you will find that passive strategies, because they're low cost and because they tend to be very consistent with their end objective, fit in beautifully from a longer term perspective. The challenge with active is a lot of those strategies over 7 to 15 years undergo changes because managers change, philosophies change, the nature of the economy changes, etc. While in the case of passive strategies, a lot of that automatically happens within the product construct itself without it having an impact on the investor. So we would say if you have a 7-15-year horizon, which is 7 to 15 year, which is what you need for equities, then passive should be core. Don't look at it as a tactical choice. I think you might want to look at tactical choices on ETFs. Once you have a portfolio which is completely constructed, you could have a small component of it going in as a particular flavor. For example, there might be a time where you might want to go overweight on a particular theme or a particular sector, some of those. But those, I think, are really, for sophisticated investors and who are clear saying that they're going to try to come in and come out basis a certain well-defined strategy. For most people, I would say that it's good to just hold it long term and let it stay there.
So we have got a lot of questions. I think we have around 60 questions, but we don't have time. So I'll be taking two more. So I think most of the questions are on the allocation side for how long should I stay invested in ETF or a passive fund, and how frequently should I rebalance my portfolio if I'm into passive products. So Anish, can you take that one up?
Yeah, so I think, like Vishal also mentioned that how frequently to rebalance is a very, there are 2-3 ways you can look at it. One is if you're going, let's say the most common one out there is a 60-40 balanced fund that, most people go with. And, that's what Jack Bogle says, if you don't know anything, start with 50-50. The max that you take it up to is 75-25. And which is 75 equity, 25 debt, and the lowest you take it down to is 25 equity, 75 debt. So, until his last days when he was 90, Jack Bogle still had a 50-50 allocation to equities and debt. He said that, it minimizes my regret, which is what also Jeff Bezos talks about. It's all about regret minimization. So, the amount of asset allocation and the amount of risk that you want in your portfolio and the frequency of rebalancing is a very individual choice, which you should sit with a financial advisor. And, once he knows your particular your particular situation and your goals, he can guide you more towards that. There are no generic answers here. So I would shy away to sort of give a very specific answer on that, because people need to know that. I just want to add on to what Vishal said last time in his last answer about the time horizon for equity investing. So and he rightly mentioned that what most of us look at 3 to 5 years as long term is not long term. And I'll give you two data points to sort of illustrate that. So if you see 2000 to 2010, that was a lost decade for S&P 500. So S&P 500 hit about 1500 in the year 2000 when we had the dot-com bubble, and then to regain that peak again, it took it 8 years. So 2000 to 2008-9 is when S&P went from 1500 down all the way to almost, I would say, I think 250 or 300, and then all the way back to 1500. So it was a lost decade. If you had invested at the peak of the dot-com bubble and you held on for 10 years, you did not make any money. But the next 10 years, as we've seen, have been remarkable for the S&P. They've gone from 1400, 1500 to 33, 3400 now. And contrast that with the Nifty. Nifty in the year 2001 was at around 1700. And in 2008, we went to 6,300, which is almost a 4x. And now in the last 12 years, we've gone from 6,300 to a peak of 12,000. That's been around 2x. 2x in 10 years is like a 7% return. Whereas in the first 10 years, we saw 4x kind of return in 10 years, which is a very high rate of return. So if you are investing in equities, be prepared for these long stretches where you will underperform. And you have to look at it as a 15 to 20 year product. You have to look at it as sticking to it when times are tough. And I think a passive product gives you the best opportunity to do that, because there are fewer variables you can tinker with. You have no fund manager, you have no philosophy, you have no affiliation to any fund house. You are affiliated to the philosophy of passive indexing or passive investing. So there is less amount of desire to sort of say to switch lanes, so to speak, saying that okay, let me switch from this fund manager to that fund manager, or I don't like this X fund house now, they have changed after something has happened, so let me switch to that fund house. So I would say that a passive vehicle helps you to stick to your investment strategy over an asset class which is very, very difficult, which is very, very long term, which is, I would say, 15 to 20 years.
Thank you, Anish. So the last question is on the NFO, which is coming up by Mirae Asset Equity Allocator. So I'll be taking that question. So Mirae Asset Equity Allocator Fund of Fund. The NFO is from 8th of September and ends on 15th of September. So this particular fund of fund will invest in ETFs belonging to large and mid cap segment, predominantly in Nifty 50, Next 50 and mid cap 150. So it will broadly give you exposure to the entire large and mid cap segment through one product itself. And as we have discussed earlier, the kind of benefits which the fund of fund provides, it's a very solution oriented product which will be very convenient for the investors. Also, one very interesting thing which this product will be doing is that asset allocation will be done between these three segments based on a model which will shift the allocation in Nifty 50, Next 50 and mid cap based on the segment's attractiveness. So again, all the questions regarding in which segment should I invest in, how should I rebalance my portfolio, how much weight movement should be there, will be addressed by this fund of fund. The cost of this fund of fund will continue to be very low. The direct plan will be around just 10 basis point and it will come under equity taxation itself. So very interesting offering on the fund of fund side, which we are coming up with. Again, the NFO period is from 8th September till 15th September. Yeah. So thank you, Anish and Vishal, for your insights today. It was very enlightening for us to hear your views on the passive industry. that's it from us. Hope the audience found this session interesting. Thank you for joining us today. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.